You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Welcome to this episode of the Business of Practice podcast, where we focus on the business and human sides of equine veterinary medicine. In this episode, we're going to talk to Dr. Jim Zeliff about Xylazine and the current regulatory environment. I'm your host, Dr. Amy Grice, business consultant and former equine practice owner. The Business of Practice podcast is brought to you in 2024 by CareCredit. Dr. Jim Zeliff grew up in northern New Hampshire, where he enjoyed trail riding and skiing. He attended Purdue University with a major in biochemistry, after which he earned his DVM in 1988. After an internship at Belmont Racetrack in New York, he founded Allegheny Equine in Murraysville, Pennsylvania. More recently, in 2019, Dr. Zeliff earned his MBA. He is an active member of the AAEP, serving a term on the board of directors, and as co-chair of the compensation subcommittee of the AAEP Commission for Equine Veterinary Sustainability. He's also the AAEP representative to the AVMA Legislative Advisory Council. During his free time, Dr. Zeliff enjoys traveling, skiing, and spending time with his wife and their son and 2 daughters. Welcome, Dr. Zeliff. Many veterinarians are uncertain about the situation with Xylazine, a drug we use every single day in equine practice. I'm eager to learn more about your work with the AVMA, how the Xylazine crisis emerged, what has already happened, and what is coming down the pike next.
Well, thank you, Amy. To start off with a little bit of a summary of my position at the AVMA is I am the AAEP's representative to the Legislative Advisory Council. And what we do is travel to Washington, D.C. twice a year, but the rest of the time via Zoom calls. And we give the AVMA GRD, the Government Relation Division, advice and guidance on what our specific species needs to have represented in Washington. This is a pretty substantial operation that they have there. It's fully funded by the AVMA, and they do meet with congressmen and senators, as well as meet with our team of lobbyists that the AVMA employs to help further the cause of veterinary medicine. The AAEP staff does a really good job keeping me up to date and current. So when I do go, I'm able to give an accurate representation of what our group as a whole is looking for. So obviously, Xylazine is a big deal. And in 2022, the people started to getting on the streets. And unfortunately for us in Pennsylvania, it started in Philadelphia, to try cutting fentanyl with a powdered form of xylazine, which somehow, I guess, prolongs and strengthens the high that people get from fentanyl. So there's some real big problems with that. Obviously, there's some serious skin lesions that people get when they're mixing xylazine into what they're taking. But it also makes them in a position where Narcan doesn't help revive the user. So there's a lot more deaths when people have taken xylazine mixed with Narcan. So where's this?
Probably mixed with fentanyl.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So where is this xylazine coming from? It's coming for the most part in bulk powder coming out of China, mostly coming through our southern border is where the DEA has been able to track this. Unfortunately, that is, as far as enforcement is concerned, it's very difficult to differentiate our xylazine in our trucks with the xylazine coming across the border. Now, what happened in 2023 then is, because of the press and all going along with this, lawmakers in Washington have been pushed to schedule xylazine. And this is something that puts us in a position where enforcement can have more tools in their toolbox to go after the suppliers of the xylazine to the people on the street. What our first initial response on the AVMA side, with help from the AAEP and this also greatly affects our bovine friend as well as lab animal and research and zoo people, because they use a lot of xylazine as well. So the AVMA had a sponsored, helped put a law together. It was a very nice bill that was submitted in the U.S. House of Representatives. And this was in January of 2023, where xylazine was going to be scheduled for human use, which was the illicit use, but not scheduled for veterinary use, illicit use. So that was really great. It actually passed the House of Representatives and went on to the Senate. What we ran into, though, unfortunately, at the Senate end, was that the DEA and the FBI stepped in and said that does not give them the power they need in order to fight this problem. So the next step was to go to the Senate, and the bill was rewritten during the year last year to schedule xylazine. So that is something we need to be prepared for. Xylazine is going to become a Schedule III drug, but the Senate version allows us two big, they call them cutouts. One is to be able for us to be able to sell the drug to what they call an end user. So we could sell a bottle of xylazine trainer, but that is something that they would not have to track and go through all the normal stuff that we do with a controlled drug. The other cutout that they have in this law is on the manufacturing end. There are two companies right now manufacturing xylazine, and those are Decra and Biomeda. Decra can make the switch to xylazine being scheduled fairly easily because Decra is already making ketamine, so their system is set up for handling controlled drugs. Biomeda, unfortunately, the only other manufacturer of xylazine, does not set up, and they have made it very clear that there's just not enough profitability in injectable xylazine for them to redo their whole manufacturing process. So what the Senate has offered, knowing this, to grandfather Biomeda in so they can continue and we can still have two manufacturers of xylazine.
The Business of Practice podcast is brought to you by CareCredit. CareCredit keeps equine veterinarians at the heart of care by providing horse owners with simple, budget-friendly financing options. By helping to bridge the gap between costs and care, CareCredit supports healthy financial relationships between veterinarians and their clients. Clients have a flexible way to pay over time for all types of care, and practices get paid in 2 business days. It's a payment experience everyone can feel good about.
So this is what's kind of teed up and ready to go. But unfortunately, the way Washington, D.C. works, they've been very busy this year, first with Ukraine, second with Israel and Gaza, and now with the election. So this has not gotten up to the front of everybody's list to get this voted on. What our first chance that we're hoping for is during what they call the lame duck session after the election. So that's our best shot. A concern we have is that the DEA will become impatient and just schedule it with no cutouts, no provisions to make things a little easier for us on the veterinary end. So that's where we stand. As far as states are concerned, each state can do their own scheduling of a drug. And two or three states have done this already, as those in those states already know that xylazine's already scheduled. And our goal is to go through, if we get these provisions made, to have those switched back to the federal way from the way the state has it set up. there's some interesting things though. So I guess the most important thing for us all to realize is Xylazine is going to be scheduled. Xylazine is going to be a Schedule 3 drug. We have had several members of the AAEP get together and present some FAQs, some frequently asked questions for the DEA to answer, because Xylazine is a non-narcotic. It probably will not have the same reporting, keeping of books, and all of the stuff that we need to do with all of our other controlled drugs. The other thing that we are trying to keep is the other alpha 2s out of this conversation. And so far, so good that this is only affecting Xylazine and not Tomidine and some of the others. So that is what we've got, Amy. There's a lot to it. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, it seems like I remember Florida, Ohio. Can you remember any of the other states?
Yep, Florida, Ohio, West Virginia. The interesting thing about Florida is it's been scheduled. They just have never treated it as scheduled.
Right.
But Ohio and West Virginia are the ones that have scheduled it. Multiple other states have considered it, but have listened to veterinarians and the AVMA and taken a step back and giving the federal legislator time to get things through. But they're starting to get impatient as well. You know, this has been going on now for 2 years, and it's really time to get us an answer. Unfortunately, that's not the way Washington, D.C. works.
Right. So
up.
I am getting the sense that the DEA can just independently make
Absolutely.
this decision, and the reason to involve the two governmental, the Senate and the House, is that they can do the carve-outs.
Correct.
Okay.
That's what we're hoping for, is those 2 carve-outs, because that'll really make a difference. There's a lot of concern about having one supplier for Xylazine.
Absolutely.
And so we really need a second one. And for us, yes, there's plenty of equine practitioners that leave a bottle of Xylazine back at the farm. Maybe we could get by fine without it. That's kind of a case by case. But for the bovine people, they just can't have a veterinarian come out every time a cow needs to be sedated.
Right.
So
right.
that's a huge one for the other species. And so, yes, exactly. Those carve-outs are why we're going through all of this.
Do you have any recollection from the bovine representative? Like, could they use a different alpha 2 that is not, it would be much, much more expensive.
Yeah, and then remember that the cow is very sensitive to alpha 2.
Yes, yeah.
So you'd almost have to have another formulation of Tomidine to
Right.
get a small enough amount into a cow.
Right.
They're very worried about that. They're hoping that the Xylazine can somehow work out for them.
Man, I could really understand why that would be a concern, Wow. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners about this situation and getting prepared?
I think we've got it. There was a time that we were appealing for people to talk to their representatives, but that time has passed. We have a very large majority of the senators that want to see this passed with these 2 cutouts. It's just a matter of the way they work their procedures and getting it done. But the AVMA has just been absolutely fantastic working with us and getting this done. They've done a lot of work, spent a lot of money on meetings and getting people in the right places, and I think we're going to be okay. But everybody needs to know that Xylazine is going to be scheduled, and it's just a matter of what it's going to look like.
So as this all unfolds, my presumption would be that the AAEP will have some various communication channels that they will use to spread this to members. What would you share about that? What do you think's going to come down?
Yeah, so we've got something pretty much teed up and ready to go in Spur, but unfortunately it keeps changing.
Right.
This last Senate stuff just came down in the last month. So that is, we really want more information than we have, and we keep thinking that right around the corner we're going to have more information. That's what the AVMA tells us. But
Right.
that will be your first one is in the email blast that everybody gets along with Spur. It will be a urgent news item when something happens.
And I imagine some people have that text alert thing. So
yes.
Yeah, so some people will get it as a text message, my guess is.
But here's a couple other things that we all need to know. First of all, if this happens, there's going to be a grace period. It's not going to be one day Xylazine the way it is now, the next minute it's scheduled. And they're looking at probably about 6 months. And I get a lot of phone calls from people wanting to know how to treat their Xylazine right now. And we treat it like we've always treated it right now, unless you're in a state that has already scheduled it. Is it a good idea to keep it in your locked drawer with your other controlled drugs? Absolutely. To know that it's going to be controlled, it's good to start getting into those habits. But unless you're in a state that's individually scheduled it on their own, we don't have to make any changes yet. And you will know from the AAEP in plenty of time before those changes occur.
Very interestingly, I heard from a Decade One member who had a spot inspection by their regional DEA officer, and they had put their Xylazine in with their controlled substances because of what all is going on, and they'd heard about, people having stuff stolen. And the DEA officer was very, very nice, but said, that's actually right now, that is unlawful. So, I mean, I think apparently the officer said, I appreciate the effort. And obviously, but just to let you know.
Sure.
Yeah. So I don't think we know what to do.
No, we don't, because when I was speaking with the AVMA and preparing for this talk, I asked that, and they're like, well, that's a good idea to start getting into the habit. But so obviously there's a lot of individual variation, and it's going to be crazy until we get this
right done. Until we really know, until they tell us what to do. So exactly. That's good. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Dr. Zeliff, and for sharing this really important information. We've all been sort of wondering as things came to a sort of a screeching halt as far as progress. And thank you all for listening to the Business of Practice podcast. And a big thanks to our sponsor, CareCredit. And to all my listeners out there, be brave, embrace change.